All right, the next phase is texturing. So using ZBrush, we'll end up doing a color texture that we can actually import into KeyShot. So here's a just reference. So this is a KeyShot plugin that is directly from ZBrush to KeyShot. It's very cool. It's very useful, and you can go back and forth, which makes it very useful as a tool to see what kind of work you're actually achieving as you're moving forward texturing. So let's zoom in on this character. This is KeyShot. Imported it from ZBrush. It still has the material from ZBrush, and it tries to do the best it can to mimic the same material that's in there. But as you can see, it doesn't have the same uh, detail that or ZBrush has. Right now I'm just changing the lens so that it's less distorted, a bit flatter, closer to a long lens opposed to a fisheye, so that we're actually seeing closer to what we actually were working in with ZBrush and just kind of neutralizing it a bit so it's not so distorted. I'm now putting on an ambient occlusion um, uh, material and KeyShot, and I'm just adjusting the intensity of the fall off so we can really see if more of that detail comes through. The ZBrush material that comes into KeyShot really doesn't do the best job as far as um, mimicking everything that you see in KeyShot. So you have to kind of cheat it here. Now I put in a background. This is an HDR map that comes with KeyShot, which is really cool. They have some really cool stuff. You can import your own as well. And just have this basic room with some what I like to do is kind of like change the height so it's not I'm distracted by the background, but at least you can obviously put a different background in if you need to, but I kind of like to see the hues that are here within this room while I'm working to make sure that it's kind of hitting the same kind of tones and feels like it's integrated into the scene. And for a headshot like this, which that's what we're going to focus on, this kind of portrait style, we're going to do kind of a shallow depth of field anyway, so the background's going to be less important. It's just there to kind of help make sure that the colors and it's just kind of a neutral for the scene that we're creating. So this is a different background. There's a few different you'll see in the interior section, but what I want is this kind of top lit light that's going to help kind of show off the contours that we've sculpted and see how far the detail shows with this ambient occlusion material that we're using. And so as I just kind of see where we're at, it takes just a little bit. This is as real time as it can be. It's not actual real-time rendering, but it's fairly damn close. So you can see as it's trying to update as it's going. I just changed out the eyes to more of a liquid milk or something so and now I'm going to change it to black. But it'll have the refraction and reflection that I like that's in the liquid milk material that they actually just have here. You can adjust it, of course, but this is just to kind of see. Right now it's just to preview what we have already so that when we go back to ZBrush, we know what we're working with. So just trying to find a good angle that showcases some of the shape of the head, the also contours and the detail that is sculpted into this character. And I think kind of a 3/4. I prefer a 3/4 myself. Doing straight-ons are only if the client really asks or if it's for a certain type of thing that you're trying to hit impact-wise for a straight-on. But 3/4 is good because it takes care of like a straight-on view and a profile view all in one. So when the client sees it, they kind of get the overall gist of the character, shape of the head, and everything else that is necessary moving forward. So I'm doing a skin shader. I've adjusted a little bit. There's these trans in the materials in KeyShot. They have some materials that are translucent, like wax and skin. A couple of variations on skin, and I've kind of created my own for just for my needs. you can obviously save them out as you work on them so that you can always come back to them, and that's kind of what I've created here in this folder that's called miscellaneous. I'm saving it out so I have something I can always come back to, just in case. You never know when uh, you've set it up and then you're happy with it and the computer or the software crashes and then you lose everything. So it's always good to save. So now back to ZBrush, and what we're going to do here is I'm going to, because we noticed that the detail wasn't really showing up, I use masking. This is another way of showcasing some of the detail that we put in here when we start doing some polypaint, which is polypaint is the paint tools that we use within ZBrush to create like a paint that we can actually either turn into a texture or using ZBrush, or I mean KeyShot. So what I've done is I've used a concaved material, and I inverted it so I can kind of see how it looks. There's this model already has these separated polygroups, which I'm just going to paint out. So you basically turn off Z tool and moving and all that, and just use RGB with a basic brush and find a basic flesh color that I'm applying here all over to kind of just do a neutral overall base, and to get rid of the kind of polygroups that were colorized here when we actually hit polypaint. And now that we have a good base, we can go back to our masking, concave masking, and it finds all the contours within the this particular one. There's so many different ones. You can do ambient occlusion, everything else, but this one particular concave works the best for our needs here to showcase the texture. And I invert it so that when I paint this darker color, it paints the shadows of the deeper areas. And so when we turn this off, you can see what it's doing. I just kind of took, clear so we can actually see what we're working on, but it's still there as we actually paint in the masking tools. It just gives you a preference here on the right. And so I'm just painting in this kind of warm kind of base color. And so going with kind of this warmer color after you have like this base is good. It's like a burnt sienna. Sometimes like a burnt umber is good as well, but I've created this. And these are just, base color names. They don't necessarily exist here, and here it's just a color I'm actually referring to. So now I've actually, now what I'm going to do is, you can see how intense it is. It's really, really intense. So what I've done is now I'm going to do a wash. I'm actually going to turn the masking off, but turn the opacity really, really low on the brush, so that as we paint the base color back on, that we can, it's just kind of like a wash. So what we've done here is we've created this is in the practical world, which is where I started in the 80s and 90s, is creating puppets and painting foam latex to make them look translucent. I would do these things like this where we'd actually create some kind of a stain wash over the sculpt so that it would kind of come out, and then and I would actually do this when we actually start having more like silicones and translucent materials as well in the real world, but these were cheats to kind of help bring out the detail. And in nature, sometimes that happens. You'll see, like if you look at the palm of your hand, you see all the wrinkles in them are actually darker than a lot of the other materials. So that's kind of what this is doing. It's kind of mimicking those natural concaved areas, and what I'm doing is just putting, again, a quick wash of the base color, not too opaque because we don't lose all that detail, otherwise it's pointless. You just want to be able to, see the detail that is in there, but also not make it look so distracting. Like, what's great about this is this gives you the flexibility opposed to doing an ambient occlusion or something. In KeyShot, you can obviously do that as a pass, but this gives you like a more natural way of how that's going to look. instead of doing a lot of layers and then figuring out that it doesn't really, in KeyShot and passes, then you bring it in and Photoshop to comp them, which I do quite a bit, but it's like it's good to get a base that's pretty damn close, and then you can add all those other adjustments to it. So what I'm doing is we actually have to change some of the values here. I'm going to bring it back to KeyShot. I want to be able to have the materials update. So when we actually see this now, we can see that it updated the materials in KeyShot. It's actually applying a lot of the same materials. There's even a sheen a little bit that we actually have in our materials that we've created. It's not as intense as we see here, but now we're seeing that that's all that detail that we lost in KeyShot from ZBrush is now starting to work its way back based on this technique of painting in the concaved areas. And so now what I'm going to do is I took the sheen off, so the speck off, so that I can work on this and create a more realistic look. As I move forward, I'm creating some other values and colors. So this is I've created a blue color for the veins and underneath the eyelids and just various hollow areas that around the face that we're going to want to break up, so it doesn't feel like it's all just one color with a big stain on it. So going in lightly, this is again really low opacity. You don't want to go too heavy with this because otherwise you're going to have to fight it, and if you end up painting it a little too deep, then and you go put back your base color as a wash, then you're going to lose even more of your the work that you applied early on by just putting this wash on. So these are just techniques that help break it up color wise and feel natural. And what I try to do when I'm just the thinking behind this is the hollow areas. Some are the veins that are obvious, like I'm painting in, but also the hollow areas of these big areas, like underneath the cheeks, inside the eyes sockets, any type of cavity where there's a lot of indented areas. I'll apply this. Now what I've done is I've actually created a warmer color. So this warmer color is where I'm applying inside the kind of areas, exposed areas like the eyelids, the tear ducts, the inside of the nostrils and ears. And so again, this is just another way of breaking up color-wise. And then I like to go back and forth because KeyShot, you see a lot more intensity when you're in ZBrush. When you go into KeyShot, you go, oh, it's actually a lot more subtle. So sometimes you have to push it, but you don't want to push it too far to where it feels cartoony or feels overly painted. You want it to feel natural. So what's good to really look at is look at nature, look at your own skin. Like I said, these shadowed areas that we applied inside the concaved areas are quite a bit like any of the wrinkles that you have in your, like behind your knees, your inside your palm and your wrist, anywhere that you see, these deep wrinkles, they'll be kind of this darker, a bit of a darker color. So that's what we're mimicking here. Now we've applied this a lighter color that we're actually going to create on the high points. This is going to be an overall wash, but for the most part, I'm going to apply this on where and how you look at this is where blood is less opacity. The opacity of the blood, and actually it's thinner blood, is where it's closest to skin and bone, opposed to a lot of fatty tissue or muscle tissue. So a good way to look at this and understand what I'm talking about is, and if you make yourself a fist, look at your knuckles and you see how they turn lighter when you actually make a knuckle. And they actually have a yellowy kind of tint to them as well. And what that is it's basically the blood is being pushed away from that area. And so there's less blood. So it's bone closer to skin. And so that's what we're trying to do in some of these areas that feel like they're very taut. And then on top of that, I'm just creating a bit of a wash again after I put the blues and a breakup. So I've applied, if you notice, I've applied this other value that's, or it's actually I'm using an alpha. And the alpha itself is a a speckled. So it's not going to be as just a simple wash of just a big brush. It's going to break it up in little tiny speckles. And right now I'm using a softer speckle that is actually a blurred. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to use a harder one. You can see I just changed it out to a less blurred speckled, so that when we actually see some of these speckles or these highlights, that uh, they won't obscure some of the detail that we have there, that we're doing with the kind of a blurred overall, because it wasn't really showing up as much. So this goes back to, look at again your palm of your hand. And you'll see almost these little speckles of highlights, and those are breakups of skin cells and blood cells and all of that kind of give that natural translucency. But so that's what we're trying to apply here. Is obviously we can make this character like any color we want. I'm going first, and this is the base. Is like I'm going more with a natural kind of, I would say, a lighter skinned Caucasian, or um, for this we're doing a gray alien, so there's these gray elements to it too as well by doing this. But these all apply for any color, but it's really good to kind of start here with this kind of paler color, because you can always darken it. It's harder to actually add if you start with a really dark. Say this, you want this creature to be green, completely green, or blue, or purple, or whatever else. It's like, then you're going to be fighting that constantly as you're doing this. So what I try to do is always do it with a kind of a neutral base, pale color, that I can really do all the breakups, and I can slowly start to add color into it. So if I want to create this, if I want to make this whole thing green, at least it will have all those breakups that I created already. But if I start green and then I wanted to change it to another color, I'm going to be fighting that constantly. So this is why it's kind of just a standard what I do when I'm doing a character, unless the character they come in and say is charcoal black. It's like, but I may still do aspects of this because I can always darken this. It's easier than vice versa, making something that's very dark and intense and has a really broad color to it that now you have to fight. So I'm rambling as I do sometimes when I'm working. But I'm just kind of giving you the insight a bit of how what I'm thinking as I'm working, and my techniques, and why I chose these techniques and this color for whatever I'm going to be doing further on. So I focused on the upper part of this. I'm not going to worry that much. Like there's a whole body that we've slightly created. We didn't really get into detail when we were sculpting it, because this is, again, when I'm starting on a character, I start on the bust. I do a bust first, because what I want to do with that is achieve the character, which is really in the head, the face. And then if a client likes it, then you can create the body from that, because it helps to understand your character from the head first. And sometimes if you have a full body, it can be very distracting for clients. They may not see the details in the face. They're obsessed with the hands or the feet or the way the midsection looks. What I just did there was going back and forth, to ZBrush, just to see, KeyShot, to see how all this is looking, and I'm getting pleased with the results so far, which is good. It is subtle, but it's like, again, we don't want to be too heavy-handed with a lot of the work we're doing here, because again, it's going to be harder to break that down later on. If we want to, we're actually going to be competing with, if you go to, say you want to do a lot of textures or a lot of patterns on this. Patterns I do after this process. Because if you do the patterns while you're doing this, and say you don't like the patterns, then you have to start all over. But by this, you have a base, and then you can save it out and start doing different patterns, and save those and render them out as different patterns. And patterns, I mean, like, how reptiles or frogs have, or other, species have, like, patterns to their skin that make them either different colors or darker patches that create these breakups. Um, so I'm just going in and adding, a bit of blues here and there and some details where I want it. Just kind of now that I have a base and I have like some breakup, I'm just seeing where I need to break it up even more. Like, add some, is that tendon have a blueness to it? Is it, or is it, yellow, or um, a lighter color? Even adding, going back into the veins, because now they see that they don't show up as well, especially when we go back to Keyshot. You kind of see, does it work, does it not? Just kind of the socket areas. Usually in the eye socket, is where I'll add a lot of blues to here and there, just because it's where a lot of the blood vessels are closer to the skin. The skin is thinner. And so these are just, breaking up areas around the wrinkles. And the idea here is to just have again, like a really good base. And so the process after we get something painted, we render it out, and if a client likes the look of it, based on the bust, because I always usually start with a bust first, because again, that is the character itself is really the eyes, the mouth, the head is really the character. And that head dictates, the body type. So this, as you can tell, is a very thin and long neck and long face. So this body's going to be, similar. It's not going to have, a big heavy body based on this anatomy. So the clients are going to know that already. And if they like this, then, you're going in the right direction. If they don't like it and they say, oh, we want to be heavier or more muscular or whatever, then you didn't waste your time designing an entire body. And with this too, as you're going to start doing, once you have a character to create a base face, like this is what I call a neutral face, is that, you start to, you can do expressions, give it a lot of character based on its expression. Make it smile, make it scream, make it whatever, but now you have your base. So I'm just adding a little bit of redness inside the areas I was before. Like, this is one of those I'll go back and forth, like inside the nostrils, inside the tear duct, inside the ears, just so they stand out when I render it, that I can see that those are more open areas of the tissue, more exposed areas, and then around some of the wrinkles here and there, bringing them out. And again, this is just, you'll see me do these like a little random movements, and those a lot of times for the paint is just to kind of break them up. So a lot of times you'll see in what's great about, ZBrush and a lot of the computer software that's 3D based is that, the symmetrical aspect. Now symmetrical can be a problem because it can look overly perfect. Now we could do this right now. What I'm doing is I'm just breaking up the skin. Now I turn the symmetry off, and I'm asymmetrical right now, and I'm actually putting molds in, or little freckles, or anything to kind of hear. So when you see it, that it starts to break the eye from its symmetry. Now you can do this with the sculpting as well, and I didn't really show that part of it. I do that quite a bit to break up symmetry, and especially with. So this is an alien. A lot of times with aliens, it'll be, and creatures that they're that are basically born this way and not deformed. I'll go very symmetrical, and I'll break it up a little bit for the organic quality. Let's say that when I'm doing a demon or something that's, for a horror film, I'll actually go a lot more asymmetrical, because there's something unsettling about asymmetry. There's something, and it feels unnatural. There's something that feels very natural about symmetry. And it's one of those that's when we're creating a creature that was born this way, that's not supposed to be deformed. It's an alien. I always typically go more symmetrical, unless say it's The Thing, from John Carpenter's The Thing, which is that was one of my favorite movies in the 80s, and it was every cell in the body was an organism, so it's going to be asymmetrical because it's constantly changing itself. So I made a point about aliens being a certain way, but it varies on the topic and the film itself, obviously. So here I'm just going in, as you can see, and just adding uh, these random little spots, and some I'll make darker than others, and they're just think of them as molds. They're ways of kind of giving the character um, uh, a bit of realism of all the imperfections that we actually have as humans. So I had a little bit more spec, and I'm going to go, just kind of break up the material here, and I just want to see how it looks in ZBrush, and then I'll bring it into KeyShot. I mean, I'll adjust the material. This is what we'll get into in the next chapter, is really in the rendering aspect of it, but I like to get an idea. This gives you just a basic idea by using some of the materials, and KeyShot tries to do the best job as it can to um, create and mimic a lot of the same materials that you're creating here, but it's not going to do a perfect job. So what I'm trying to do is, like, I'm experimenting with cavities and all this other stuff in here, and I can go into best render, and you can see it's over the top here, but this is like creating almost ambient occlusion. So now I'm going to go back to ZBrush, see what it looks like, and a little of that was applied. It's again it just some things it cannot do. It cannot take all the nuances that we just saw in that render here in ZBrush and mimic it, but I'm just looking at if I apply that, what would the impact be in here. So it's kind of a back and forth. I'm messing around with let's play around with the eyes again. I think because of the back and forth of a lot of these, like rendering and use the materials. It's use the materials from ZBrush as I changed that as a preference, and now I'm just starting to try to get it back to where it was. So just playing with the colors here to get it, and also the spec for the skin, to get closer to. What's great about specular is and you have to be careful. Is if you go too far with it, then it feels very CG. But if you don't go far enough, then you lose a lot of your detail, because it helps bring out some of the detail by having spec and shadows. And spec being, obviously, I think everybody knows what spec is, but the highlights, the shiny aspect of it. So, getting very close to where, I think it's a good place. Here, it's subtle in a lot of ways, and that's kind of the way I want it to feel. I don't want it to feel over the top. You can see the veins here and there in the shoulder. You can see other aspects of things that are showing up. I'm just applying some other contrast issues to the HDR, which is great. You can adjust the HDR so that it's not subjected to the exact way it comes in. So you can play with the contrast, the brightness, the darkness, and even the hue if you want to change the hue of it. I'm just adjusting that so that, one, it stands out from the background, because what I'll end up doing, even though I can put a different background behind it, I want it to feel like it's integrated within this background. And the other is I do want the highlights to be a little punchier and the shadows to be a little punchier. It can get a little bit, sometimes you'll notice in KeyShot, sometimes it feels a little soft or a little less contrasty. And I really like to have a bit more contrast in my renders. I can obviously do a lot of this in Photoshop at the end and just add more contrast, but I like places to be when I'm rendering, and it doesn't take long, but to get them close enough to where I understand what they're going to look like. And then I can do all the final stuff in Photoshop. Alright, so we have our base here, which looks really good as a base. Let's warm up a few places here and there. And I think I'm going to add a few little patterns, just kind of break up, thinking about, like, where I could actually add some patterns to just make this character so he's not just one tone. I mean, even though you can see a lot of variations, you see a lot more in ZBrush than you do in KeyShot, but just just breaking up these because I feel like, there's certain areas that I really didn't see come out as much as I wanted to in Keyshot, so I'm just kind of emphasizing them with um, some of the breakups here and there with the warm colors. So I find like there's a bunch of different or patterns. I'm just going to just do some real quick, you know, uh, again going back to the speckled that I use for the highlights. You can intensify them as making them a little harsher, as far as the intensity, also making the brush a little bigger. And I'm going with like a kind of a warmer breakup here. And I'm doing it symmetrically because a lot of times if you look at certain reptiles, they do tend to, and even insects and everything else, they do tend to have like these very symmetrical breakups. And then there's here and there some asymmetrical aspects, which we'll add later in Photoshop. So I'm just doing this quickly, and and then we'll go into render, and I think we're in a good place.